Long ago, in the bustling city of Lagos, there lived a very wealthy man named Kwame Asante. His name meant thank you in the Akan language. But Kwame had forgotten how to be thankful for anything. Kwame owned the tallest glass building in Victoria Island, where he could look down at the lagoon and see the colorful boats of fishermen who worked hard every day. He had more money than he could count, enough to buy 100 cars, 10 big houses, and even his own airplane. Kwame was the chief of a big company that built roads and bridges all across West Africa. Thousands of people worked for him, and they all called him Oga Kwame, which means Boss Kwame in Yoruba. Everyone bowed their heads when they saw him because he was so powerful and important. But here's what was strange. Even though Kwame had everything that money could buy, his heart felt as empty as a calabash with a crack in it. It was like having a big feast with no family to share it with, or like dancing to beautiful drums with no friends to dance beside you. One evening during the Harmattan season, when the dusty wind blew from the Sahara Desert, Kwame was walking out of his tall building when he saw something that would change his life forever. There was an old man sitting under the big baobab tree in front of his building. This wasn't just any old man. He was wearing simple white clothes and had the wise eyes of an elder who had seen many seasons come and go. Let me tell you the story of how Kwame Asante became so wealthy. He wasn't born rich. No. When he was a small boy in the village of Kumasi in Ghana, his family was very poor. His father, Kofi, worked hard in the cocoa farms, and his mother, Ama, sold vegetables in the local market. Every morning before the rooster crowed, young Kwame would help his mother carry heavy baskets of yams, plantains, and tomatoes to the market. Kwame, his grandmother would say, "Remember that Ubuntu. I am because we are. Your success must lift up your people too." But Kwame was determined to escape poverty. He studied by the light of kerosene lamps, walking many kilometers to school each day. His teachers saw that he was very clever, and they helped him get a scholarship to study in England. When Kwame returned to Africa as a grown man, he had big dreams and modern ideas. He started a small construction company, building houses and roads. Slowly, his business grew like a mighty baobab tree, spreading its branches across Ghana, Nigeria, and other West African countries. But as Kwame's wealth grew, he began to forget the Ubuntu wisdom his grandmother had taught him. He moved from his village to the big city. He stopped visiting his family. He forgot the friends who had helped him when he was poor. Kwame built himself a mansion with marble floors and gold decorations. But he lived there alone. He owned 7 expensive cars from Germany. But he had no one to drive with him to visit the beautiful places in his homeland. He had forgotten that in African culture, wealth means nothing if you don't share it with your community. His grandmother's words echoed in the wind. But Kwame's ears had become deaf to the wisdom of his ancestors. On that dusty Harmattan evening, the orange sun was setting behind the Lagos lagoon like a giant ball of fire. The call to prayer echoed from nearby mosques, and the sound of talking drums could be heard from a distant cultural center. Kwame stepped out of his air-conditioned building, wearing his expensive agbada made of the finest silk. His gold wristwatch caught the last rays of sunlight as he walked toward his black Mercedes-Benz. But then he noticed the old man sitting peacefully under the ancient baobab tree. The elder looked like he had been sitting there since the beginning of time. His white agbada was simple but clean, and his gray beard was braided with small cowrie shells, the traditional sign of wisdom and prosperity in many African cultures. Unlike other beggars who might approach wealthy people asking for help, this elder simply sat quietly, watching the busy Lagos traffic with calm, knowing eyes. When he saw Kwame, he didn't stretch out his hand for money or call out for help. Instead, he looked at Kwame with eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the ancestors. Those eyes were deep brown like the rich soil of Africa, and they seemed to see straight into Kwame's soul. The elder's face was carved with wrinkles that told stories of many years, many joys, and many sorrows. Sanu Kwame Asante. the elder said in Hausa, greeting him with the warmth of a grandfather welcoming his grandson home. Kwame stopped walking, surprised. How did this stranger know his name? Do I know you, old man? He asked in English, feeling confused and a little frightened. The elder chuckled softly, like the sound of a gentle breeze through palm leaves. You don't know me yet, my son, but I know you very well. I know you have more naira than you can count, but you sleep with sadness in your heart each night. I know you have a big house but no family to fill it with laughter. I know your spirit is searching for something, but you have forgotten what your ancestors taught you about true wealth. Kwame's mouth opened wide in shock. How could this simple old man know so much about his private life? It seemed impossible, but something about the elder's presence made him want to listen. Come, sit with me under this baobab tree, the elder said, patting the ground beside him. The ancestors have sent me to remind you of something very important that you have forgotten. Even though Kwame was a very busy and important man, something deep in his heart told him to sit down next to the elder. Maybe it was the way the old man reminded him of his beloved grandmother. Or maybe it was the loneliness that had been eating at his soul like termites in wood. The elder looked at Kwame with those wise, ancient eyes, and spoke in a voice as gentle as a mother singing a lullaby. My son, you have accumulated great wealth, but you have forgotten the most important African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. You have been running alone for so long that you have lost your way. Kwame laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. Easy words from someone who owns nothing. You don't understand the modern world, old man. I worked day and night to build what I have. Why should I share it with people who were too lazy to work as hard as I did? The elder nodded slowly, like a patient teacher speaking to a child who hasn't learned his lesson yet. I understand why you think this way, Kwame, but tell me, with all your naira and your power, when was the last time you felt the joy of Ubuntu? When did you last share a meal with family and feel your heart full of love? When did you last help someone without expecting anything in return, just because it is the African way? Kwame thought about it and realized he couldn't remember. It had been many years since he felt real happiness or connection with others. The elder continued, speaking in the rhythmic way of traditional storytellers. You have built your life like a house with no foundation in the community. You think you are strong like the baobab tree, but baobabs survive because their roots connect deep with the earth, and their branches provide shade for everyone. You have forgotten that your strength comes from your people, and your success has meaning only when it lifts up others. Listen to me carefully, my son, the elder said, his voice becoming serious like thunder before rain. The winds of change are coming. Your house of gold will be shaken, but do not fear. Sometimes, the storm must come to teach us that we need the shelter of community. Sometimes, we must lose what we think is important to find what is truly valuable. That's ridiculous, Kwame said, standing up and brushing dust from his expensive clothes. You're just a crazy old man who doesn't understand business or success in the modern world. But as Kwame walked to his Mercedes, the elder's words followed him, like the persistent beating of talking drums. The ancestors are calling you home, Kwame. Your castle of gold will crumble. But don't be afraid. When you remember Ubuntu, that you are because we are, you will find the wealth that can never be stolen. That night, Kwame tossed and turned in his big, empty bed, the elder's words echoing in his mind like a song he couldn't forget. Just as the elder had predicted, within 1 week, Kwame's world began to crumble like a mud wall in the rainy season. It started when government officials arrived at his office building with papers showing that his business partner, Chaik, had been stealing money from their company and blaming Kwame for the crimes. Chaik, who had been like a brother to him and had eaten many meals at Kwame's table, had betrayed him to save himself from prison. Why did you do this to me, my brother? Kwame asked Chaik with tears streaming down his face like rivers during the rainy season. I'm sorry, Kwame, Chaik said, unable to look him in the eyes. But they threatened to put me in Kirikiri prison for 20 years if I didn't help them catch you. I had to choose between us, and I chose to save myself. The newspaper headlines screamed across Lagos. Wealthy businessman Kwame Asante accused of corruption. The radio stations buzzed with gossip, and even the market women who sold tomatoes and pepper knew his name. In just 5 days, everything Kwame had built over 20 years was destroyed like a sandcastle, swept away by ocean waves. The government froze all his bank accounts, took away his mansion, his cars, and his airplane. His construction company was closed, and hundreds of his workers lost their jobs. People who used to bow and call him Oga Kwame now pointed at him and whispered behind their hands. Former friends crossed the street to avoid him. Business associates who used to invite him to their parties suddenly didn't know his phone number. Kwame had to move from his marble mansion to a small one-room apartment in Mushin, where the walls were thin and he could hear his neighbors arguing and babies crying. Instead of eating jollof rice with chicken and fresh fish, he bought gari and groundnuts from street vendors. As he sat on his small mattress in his tiny room, eating beans from a plastic bowl while listening to rain drumming on the tin roof, Kwame remembered the elder's prophecy. Your castle of gold will crumble. The old man had been right about everything, but the elder had also said something else, that losing everything would help him find what was truly valuable. Kwame didn't understand what that meant yet, but his heart told him he needed to find that wise elder again. 3 weeks after losing everything, Kwame walked slowly back to his old office building. He looked very different now. Instead of his fine silk agbada, he wore a simple cotton shirt and trousers bought from Balogun Market. Instead of his handmade Italian leather shoes, he wore plastic sandals. The security guards of the building that used to be his didn't recognize the thin, humble man walking toward them. But there, sitting in exactly the same spot under the mighty baobab tree, was the wise elder. I have been waiting for you, my son, the old man said with a gentle smile, as if he knew Kwame would return. Kwame sat down beside him on the dusty ground, feeling ashamed and defeated. Baba, you were right, he whispered, using the respectful term for elder. I lost everything, just as you said I would. My money, my houses, my company, my friends. Everything is gone like smoke in the Harmattan wind. The elder's eyes were full of compassion, not the I told you so look that Kwame had expected. I am sorry you had to experience such pain, my son, he said softly. But I am not sorry that you are learning the lesson your grandmother tried to teach you long ago. What lesson, Baba? Kwame asked, his voice full of bitterness. That life is unfair? That you cannot trust anyone? That all my hard work was for nothing? The elder shook his head like a patient father correcting his child. No, Kwame. The lesson is that everything you thought was most important was never truly important at all. You confused having things with being rich. You forgot that in African wisdom, a person is only as wealthy as the community they serve. But what do I do now, Baba? How do I rebuild my life? How do I survive without money or power? The elder's face lit up like sunrise over the savannah. You don't rebuild your old life because your old life was empty like a drum with no skin. You build a new life, a life based on Ubuntu, on serving others, on remembering that we rise by lifting others. Tomorrow, the elder continued, go to the Lagos Community Center in Surulere. Tell them you want to help feed the hungry and house the homeless. You will be surprised by the treasures you discover there. But I have nothing to give anyone, Kwame protested. You have everything, the elder smiled. You have hands to work, a heart to care, and wisdom earned through suffering. These are the greatest gifts of all. That night, Kwame lay on his thin mattress listening to the sounds of Lagos, the distant music from a beer parlor, children playing in the courtyard, mothers calling their families to dinner. For the first time in years, he really listened to the life happening around him. He thought about the elder's words. Part of him wanted to fight to get his old life back. He could try to prove his innocence, find new investors, and rebuild his construction empire. He was still smart and determined. He had risen from poverty once before, but another part of him remembered how lonely and empty his wealthy life had been. Yes, he had been rich and powerful, but he had also been miserable. He had spent 20 years building something that disappeared in 5 days. Maybe the elder was right. Maybe he had been building on sand instead of rock. The next morning, instead of going to see lawyers or business contacts, Kwame took a Danfo bus to Surulere to find the Lagos Community Center. The center was a simple concrete building painted in bright colors, with murals of African children playing and families sharing meals. A kind woman named Aduni was in charge, wearing a beautiful head wrap and speaking in the warm, welcoming way of Yoruba mothers. "We need someone to help serve lunch to people who have no food," Aduni said when Kwame told her he wanted to volunteer. "Have you ever done this kind of work before?" "No, Mama," Kwame admitted, using the respectful term for an older woman. "I spent my whole life thinking only about making money. I forgot how to care for my community." Aduni smiled like she understood. "Well, today is a good day to remember who you are. Put on this apron and help us serve rice and stew to our people." As Kwame ladled jollof rice and chicken stew into plastic bowls for hungry families, something magical began to happen. People smiled at him and said, "Thank you, brother, and God bless you." Not because he was rich or powerful, but because he was helping them when they needed help. An old grandmother squeezed his hand and said, "My son, you have a good heart. May the ancestors bless you." A young mother with a baby on her back said, "You remind me that good people still exist in this world." By the end of the day, Kwame felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. He felt truly useful and connected to his people. Kwame began going to the community center every single day. At first, he just served food and cleaned tables. But soon, Aduni saw his potential. "You understand business, and you speak good English," she told him. "Will you help our people learn skills to find work and start their own small businesses?" Kwame discovered that helping others solve their problems filled his heart with more joy than making millions of naira ever had. He listened to their stories with the patience his grandmother had shown him as a child, and he shared the business knowledge he had learned over many years. There was Biodun, a tailor who had lost his sewing machine in a fire. Kwame helped him write a business plan and find a microfinance organization that gave him a loan to buy new equipment. Soon, Biodun was making beautiful traditional clothes and earning enough to feed his family. There was Fatima, a woman from the north who made the most delicious kalishi spice-dried meat, but didn't know how to market it. Kwame helped her create colorful labels and find customers in upscale Lagos neighborhoods. Her small business grew so much that she hired 3 other women to help her. There was Emeka, a young man who was brilliant with computers, but had never had the chance to go to university. Kwame spent evenings teaching him advanced computer skills and helped him start a website design business from a small shop in Computer Village. Each person Kwame helped made him feel richer than all his millions ever had. When Biodun's tailoring business succeeded, he brought Kwame a beautiful agbada as a gift. When Fatima's kilishi business grew, she insisted on bringing Kwame packages of her best products. When Emeka got his first big website contract, he danced with joy and hugged Kwame like a father. Kwame's life became completely different from what it used to be. Instead of living alone in a mansion, he lived in a small apartment, but was surrounded by neighbors who became like family. Mama Kero, who lived next door, taught him how to cook proper Nigerian soups. Uncle Tunde, who played the talking drums, taught Kwame traditional Yoruba rhythms that made his soul dance. For the first time since leaving his village, Kwame had real friends, people who cared about him, not for what he owned, but for who he was. They didn't care that he used to be wealthy, and they didn't care that he was poor now. They cared about him because he listened to their problems, because he shared his knowledge freely, and because he always tried to help when someone was in need. Every morning when Kwame woke up, he felt excited about the day ahead, not because he might make money, but because he might help someone's dream come true, not because he might gain power, but because he might help someone feel less alone in the world. He was finally learning what his grandmother meant when she taught him about Ubuntu, that we are all connected, and that true wealth comes from lifting up your community. 6 months later, Kwame was walking home from the community center when he saw the elder again. But this time, everything was completely different. The old man was no longer wearing simple white clothes. Instead, he was dressed in the most magnificent traditional robes Kwame had ever seen. Rich purple and gold kente cloth that marked him as someone of great importance. A beautiful car was parked nearby, and the elder looked like a traditional king or high chief, but his eyes were exactly the same. Those deep, wise eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of all the ancestors. "Hello, Kwame," the man said with a warm smile. "I think it's time I told you the truth about who I really am." Kwame's eyes grew wide with amazement. "You're not really a simple elder, are you, Baba?" "My name is Nana Akoto," the man said, using the title reserved for paramount chiefs. "I am many things to many people. Sometimes I appear as a beggar when someone needs to meet a beggar. Sometimes I appear as a chief when someone needs to meet a chief. Sometimes I appear as a teacher when someone is ready to learn the most important lesson of their life." "You tricked me," Kwame said, feeling confused and a little hurt. Nana Akoto shook his head gently. "I didn't trick you, my son. I helped you remember who you really are. You were living like a man who had forgotten his ancestors' wisdom. You needed to lose all the false wealth so you could find the true wealth that was always inside your heart. Why did you choose me? Why did you care what happened to one lost man?" The chief's eyes sparkled with the warmth of a grandfather's love. "Because I could see that, deep in your heart, you still carried your grandmother's Ubuntu wisdom. You just needed to remember that your success means nothing unless it lifts up your people." 10. The greatest choice. 400 words. Nana Akoto reached into his robes and pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with traditional wax. "Your legal troubles are over, Kwame. The charges against you have been dropped. Inside this envelope are papers that prove your innocence, and documents showing that investors want to help you rebuild your business empire. You could become a billionaire again, even richer than before." Kwame stared at the envelope, knowing that inside were papers that could give him back everything he had lost. He could have his mansion again, his fleet of cars, his powerful company. He could be wealthy and important again, feared and respected by everyone in Lagos. But as he looked at the envelope, Kwame thought about his new life. He thought about Biodun proudly wearing the clothes he made, Fatima's children having enough to eat because of her thriving business, and Emeka's excitement when he designed his first website. He thought about Mama Caro teaching him to cook, Uncle Tunde teaching him to play drums, and Adunni trusting him to help their community grow stronger. In his old life, he had woken up every morning in a marble mansion feeling empty and alone. In his new life, he woke up every morning in a small room feeling grateful and connected to his people. "I cannot take it, Nana," Kwame said, gently pushing the envelope back toward the chief. "I don't want my old life back." Nana Akoto smiled like he had expected this answer all along. "Tell me why, my son." "Because I finally understand what my grandmother tried to teach me about Ubuntu," Kwame said, feeling more sure of himself than he had in years. "True wealth isn't about how much money you have in the bank. It's about how much love you have in your community. It's about how many people you lift up and how many hearts you touch." The old Kwame built a business empire, but was miserable and alone, Kwame continued. The new Kwame helps people build their dreams, and he is the happiest he has ever been. "I don't want to go back to being empty inside, even if it means having less money." Nana Akoto's smile grew even brighter. "You have learned the greatest wisdom of our ancestors, Kwame. Ubuntu teaches us that we are because we are together. Now you understand that helping others is not something you do in addition to success. It is success." 5 years later, Kwame stood in front of a room full of young African entrepreneurs at the Lagos Business Center, teaching them about true success. Real success, he told them, isn't about having the biggest house in Victoria Island or the most expensive car in Lagos. It's about remembering Ubuntu, that we rise by lifting others. It's about using your talents to make your community stronger and your people prouder. A young woman raised her hand. But Uncle Kwame, don't you miss being super rich? Don't you wish you could buy anything you wanted? Kwame smiled, thinking about his wonderful life now. He was married to Aduni, the kind woman who had welcomed him to the community center and who had become the love of his life. They lived in a modest but comfortable house, filled with laughter, traditional music, and the aroma of good Nigerian food. He was now the director of the Lagos Community Development Network, helping thousands of people across the city start businesses, learn skills, and lift themselves out of poverty. His organization had helped create over 2,000 jobs and had become a model for other African cities. I am richer now than I ever was when I had billions of naira, he told the young people. I have a wife who loves me, a community that trusts me, and work that honors my ancestors. Every morning when I wake up, I thank the spirits for giving me another day to serve my people. After his talk, Kwame walked home through his neighborhood, greeting Mama Karo selling vegetables, listening to Uncle Tunde's evening drumming, and stopping to help children with their homework. His phone buzzed with a message from the community center. New volunteer coming tomorrow. Lost everything and wants to help others. Sounds familiar? Kwame laughed, remembering Nana Akoto and the lesson that had changed everything. Somewhere in Lagos, another person was about to discover that losing everything might be the best thing that ever happened to them. The ancestors had taught him well. True wealth isn't what you keep for yourself, but what you give to your community. Ubuntu means we are because we are together, and the richest person is the one who makes others rich in spirit, hope, and opportunity. The end. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.